Saturday, November 4th. Back in October, when we all visited the Tangerine Nursery, Lewis definitely said to me, "You should come again." I think he meant it. I know I meant it when I said I wanted to. But since that day, Teresa and Tino have held all of our project meetings in class. Anyway, I decided to take charge of the situation. I wanted to go back to the nursery, and so I did. Mom drove me through Tangerine on a sleepy Saturday morning. I had no problem remembering the way out through the groves, down the long driveway, past the house, to the Quin- Quinset Hunt Hut. She said, "Are you sure these people are expecting you?" "Yeah." "What kind of building is that?" "It's called a Quonset Hut." "Is it safe?" "Nom, it's built by the Army. It'll withstand a direct hit by a 20 megaton bomb." "What goes on in there? Is that their office?" "It's more like Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory." "Please, Paul, give me a break. I'm worried about you out here." "Mom, it's a citrus tree nursery. The worst thing we could happen to me is I'd overdose on vitamin C." "Just don't touch anything, Rusty. You haven't had your booster shot." "Okay. What time should I come back?" "I'll call you." "All right, be careful." Mom pulled away. I walked up to the door of the Quonset hut and knocked. There was no answer. Then from behind me I heard, "Fisherman, what are you doing here?" It wasn't a friendly greeting. I turned and saw Tino and Lewis coming out of the house with coils of thick black hose wrapped around their shoulders like bandolera ammo belts. Tino and I get along okay on the soccer team as long as I know my place and stay in it. But he has little use for me away from the team, and he has no use for me at all in science class. I swallowed and said, "I wanted to find out more about the nursery. Lewis said to come back sometime, so I did." "What? You don't have phones in Lake Windsor Downs?" Lewis said, "It's all right, Tino. I invited him to come back, and he's come." He pointed to a pile of black hoses on the ground. "You can grab some of those and work with us." I wrapped a bandolera of hose around my shoulder and followed them. We walked around the Quonset hut, through the rows of adult trees and out to the baby trees, the golden dawn tangerines. We laid out all of Lewis's hose, then all of Tino's and all of mine up and down the rows of little trees. Then we went back and loaded up again from the pile. We continued to haul and lay out hose for 3 hours until every row had a black rubber stripe running down it. We walked back again through the dark grove, but this time Tino sat down on a crate between two large trees. Lewis pointed to two more crates, which I hauled between the trees for us to sit on. He reached up, pulled off a tangerine, and tossed it to Tino. Then he tossed one to me. We all sucked them down hungrily, and Lewis pulled down three more. I hadn't said a word for hours until Lewis asked me, "So how do you like the tangerine business?" "I like it a lot." Tino snorted. "Is that right? Why do you like about it? What do you like about it?" I knew the answer to that right away. "The way it smells. I like how it smells out here." I held up my tangerine. "I guess I like how these taste too." Lewis smiled. I asked him, "What's the best thing about it for you?" Lewis stood up to get us three more. Then he sat down. He answered, "Just like you said, the way it smells out here. That scent is like nothing else in the world." Lewis looked at me intensely, but he spoke softly, almost musically, about almost tearfully. "You know, I walk out here in the morning sometimes and I fall on my knees and I weep right into the ground. I am overcome by the beauty of it all. I've tried to describe that scent all around in the air. I've tried to give it a name, but the closest I can come up is it is the scent of a golden dawn." Lewis looked away. Tina was staring at him with reverence, with no trace of the hard guy face he usually carries around. We rested for 5 more minutes and then went back to the baby trees. Lewis gave each of us a small, sharp hand clipper, which he called a tangerine clipper. We proceeded to crawl up and down the rows, slicing a hole in the black hose next to each tree. It was a back-breaking, knee-scraping, glasses-fogging work. I could feel the sun doing damage to the back of my neck and to the backs of my legs. We didn't break again until we had sliced 1,000 holes in 1,000 spots. Then we sprawled out again between the trees with our tangerines. Louis and Tina were hot and tired, but I was more like in critical condition. Louis said, "I think that's all for you today." Tino added, "Yeah, fisherman, you don't look too good. You look like a lobster special." Lewis pointed at the Quonset hut. Take him inside, Tino. Get him some of that first aid spray. Tino actually took my arm, helped me up, and guided me into the hut. He found a purple aerosol can, shook it, and said, "Close your eyes." He sprayed a cold white foam on the back of my neck, my arms, and my knees. I sat carefully on the top of the desk and said, "Thanks. Can I use this telephone?" "Yeah, go ahead." Mom answered the phone after one ring. I said, "Mom, I'm ready to be picked up." "Are you all right, Paul?" "Yeah." "You sound hurt." "No. I'll be there in 15 minutes." I hung up and said to Tino, "So where's Teresa today?" "She's out with her daddy. She's helping him fill out some paperwork at the county building." "Oh, yeah?" "Yeah, she's getting more into that now. She's learning how to run the family business." Tina paused. I was thinking, Teresa is real busy with that stuff, so maybe you should do the final report for the science group, on a computer." He nodded like he was agreeing with himself. "Teresa thinks so too. In fact, it's her idea." "Sure, I can do that." I waited for Tino to look at me. "We could have a project meeting at my house if you like. I can show you the types of graphics that we have on my dad's computer, pie charts and stuff. We could design the whole thing." "Yeah, well, let me talk to Teresa about that." I slid off the desk and started to walk awkwardly toward the front door. I felt like my skin was too tight for my body. Tino laughed. "That's hard work, huh?" "Yeah, I don't know how people can work out in the sun all day. I wouldn't make it as a fruit picker. I'd be dead." Tino nodded. "Yeah, well, you did what you got to do. I never did that because I never had to." He started to follow me down the length of the hut. "My daddy had to. Louis did it, too, but he did it because he wanted to. He used to beg to go on trips with Daddy and Tio Carlos. He picked oranges down on in Orlando. He picked tangerines over in Merritt Island. That's how his knee got messed up." I opened up the front door enough to look out for Mom. Tina went on. "You don't pick tangerines, you clip them with one of those clippers. Louis was doing that when he fell out of a tree. He was 12 years old back then. He landed on his kneecap, cracked it, and stabbed himself in the hand with clippers. Daddy picked him up and drove him to the hospital. They bandaged up his hand, right? But Louis didn't say anything about his knee because it wasn't looking too bad, and he was afraid that our mama wouldn't let him go along to pick anymore. The next morning, his knee looked like a soccer ball. He had messed up his cartilage so bad that they had to operate. They had to put his pin in there too. He couldn't walk at all for about 2 months. And he was right about Mama. Mama told him he could never go out picking again. Tino nodded slowly, remembering. Anyway, after Mama died, Louis couldn't go anywhere. He had to stay at home with Teresa and me. Tino pushed past me through the door. I followed him outside. He said, "It worked out okay for Louis, though. He became a genius at horticulture. There's nobody better in Florida." I wanted to see if that was all that he had to say. It wasn't. Louis played soccer, at Tangerine Middle School, at the high school, too. No kidding. Yeah, he was good. We used to go watch him. What position did he play? Tino looked surprised at the question. What else could he play? He was a goalie. The goalie? Yeah, they had to put him in there because he was handicapped. I looked at Tino to see if he was mocking me. He wasn't. He was just making conversation. He was in the nicest mood that I have ever seen him in. I figured it was my chance to clear my conscience once and for all. I said, "Hey, do you remember when you guys got busted at the carnival?" "Yeah, what about it?" "Well, I'm the one who ratted you out. They accused some of the Lake Windsor soccer players of wrecking that exhibit. The Axeman? I'm the one who told them that it was Tangerine middle soccer players." Tino nodded slowly. Then he said, "Turn around." "What?" "Turn around. Look over there." I turned around and looked out towards the house. Suddenly I felt a swift kick in my backside. It made me hop forward about a foot. I turned back and looked at Tino. He had a sly smile on his face. He said, "If any of your Lake Windsor homeboys ever ask you what happened when I found out, you'll tell them about that." Mom's car appeared around the corner. She drove through the shade of the house into the sunlight and up to where we were standing. She waved to Tino as I climbed in. Tino returned her wave and then walked around the Quonset hut to go back to work. Sunday, November 5th. Mr. Donnelly called Dad last night, which is funny because Mr. Donnelly has never returned Mom's phone calls or responded to her letter about the row of lightning rods on his roof. Anyway, he called Dad and invited us all over there tonight. Mr. Donnelly, aside from being an outlaw wanted by the Agricultural Committee, is a big University of Florida football booster. He has season tickets. He knows the coach. He even travels to games as far away as Tennessee. Dad has been after him ever since we moved here to come and see Eric kick. Now that Eric is starting to live up to Dad's bragging, Mr. Donnelly has taken notice. After the field goals of 40 and 45 yards in the game against Flagler, he showed up at the practice field and watched Eric make three 50 yarders in a row. He was impressed. So we're all invited over there to meet two other Florida football guys from this area. Dad says, I want coaches from Florida, FSU, and Miami to start hearing about this kid from Lake Windsor High. The kid from Lake Windsor High agrees. Eric is now as famous in these parts as Antoine Thomas. There are even those who say that Eric is more important to the team. This hasn't sat well with Antoine and some of the other players. Some of them obviously don't like Eric, but it seems that most of them do. Eric and his flunky Arthur are always on demand. They're in big demand this evening. Arthur picked Eric up after 2 hours after about 2 hours ago to go somewhere. We never know where, and they'll be going somewhere else right after Mr. Donnelly's. You can just imagine Mom's reaction to this visit tonight. She told Dad, I don't care if this is supposed to be about football. He is going to tell me why he won't answer the letter and the phone calls from the Agricultural Committee. Dad said, please, tonight is not about that. Tonight is only about Eric. Mom, Dad, and I decided to walk to Mr. Donnelly's. We turned the corner at Kew Gardens Drive just as the sun was setting. The row of lightning rods in the red sky looked like some weird science experiment, like NASA's model home on Mars, complete with a for sale sign. Arthur Bayer's muddy Land Cruiser was parked out on the street in front of the house, ready for a quick getaway. I wonder if Eric and Arthur were sitting in there. I stared hard at the tinted glass, but I couldn't see anything inside. Dad must have been wondering the same thing. He started to walk up to the passenger side door, but he never got there. That was when the mosquitoes attacked. I looked up into the setting sun. Mosquitoes completely filled the air above us, hovering there, skinny black and silent. They glided down onto us like tiny blood-sucking men in parachutes. We all started to slap at ourselves as we felt the first bites. I watched one land on Mom's cheek. She screamed and started to run. Dad and I hurried after her. At the front door, we brushed at each other frantically until Terry Donnelly opened it. We drove we dove through the door, nearly capsizing a glass trophy case in the foyer. Around the corner in the great room, a videotape of a Florida Gators football game was playing on the big screen TV, and there sat Eric, composed, casual, wearing his football hero smile. He was on a long couch with Mr. Donnelly and two other men, whom Mr. Donnelly introduced as Larry and Frank. Eric stood up when the others did, like a gentleman would. Everything seemed to be going exactly as planned. Larry and Frank were smiling. They seemed to like Eric, to be impressed with him, to be ready to support the Eric Fisher football dream in any way they could. Mom looked around and said, So where is Arthur? Eric seemed genuinely surprised by the author. He said, Arthur, he's out in the truck, as if to say, where else would he be? But Mr. Donnelly called over to his son, Terry, go outside and tell that boy to come in. Eric waved at Terry Donnelly and said, Nah, he doesn't want to come in. He smells too much like bug spray. Mom sniffed. Now that you mention it, so do you. Eric pulled his shirt up to his nose and sniffed too. Bear always has bug spray in the truck in case we want to go mud running. Mr. Donnelly said, Yeah, those swamp skeeters will eat you alive. The conversation went on like that for a while. Eric remained charming. Larry and Frank remained impressed. Arthur Bayer remained in the truck. Mr. Donnelly turned out to be a nice guy and a good host. He didn't sit there listening to Eric all night. He talked to Dad about old Charlie Burns and the parties he used to have in his skybox. Then he talked to Mom about the concerns of the Agricultural Committee. I drifted back over to that glass trophy case to examine its contents. A lot of it seemed to be rinky-dink stuff that Terry Donnelly won as a kid. But there were a couple of old things that belonged to Mr. Donnelly. Suddenly, he was at my elbow, saying, I keep my Heisman trophy out in the garage. I laughed, and he continued, Now, what about you, Paul? Are you a kicker, too? I play soccer, sir. Ah, then I suppose you are a kicker. Do you play for Lake Windsor Middle? No, sir, I play for the War Eagles, Tangerine Middle School. He opened his eyes wide. I remember Betty Bright's team. You have those all-star girls playing for you, right? Yes, sir. How is your season going? We're number one. We're undefeated. We're breaking all county scoring records. Mr. Donnelly looked at me with increasing interest. And you're doing all that with a mixed boy-girl team? Yes, sir. He nodded. I've known your coach for a long time. She's an extraordinary person. Does she ever talk about her career? No, sir. No? Well, let me tell you. Betty Bright is the greatest track and field athlete ever to come out of this area. She ran two She ran the 100-meter dash and the 100-meter hurdles. She threw the discus and the javelin. She did the high jump and the broad jump. She did it all right over at Tangerine High. Did she ever play soccer? No, not to my knowledge. She became famous as a hurdler. I mean, really famous. The Times started to send her to the U.S. Olympic trials back in 1978. She made the team too. She competed in the Pan Am Games in Buenos Aires the next year. Here, Mr. Donnelly turned to the men who were watching football. Do you guys remember the fun drive we had for Betty Bright? Larry got up and joined us. Sure, she's the runner. The hurdler, Mr. Donnelly corrected him. He turned back to me. I remember Larry and a bunch of us at the newspaper office one Saturday afternoon watching Betty Bright on ABC's Wide World of Sports. You know, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. And there she was. It was a great feeling. Our paper had gotten behind her cause, and now there she was. Larry interjected. She got punched or something, right? Right. The East German hit her in the eye going over the first hurdle. Betty finished fourth in her heat and didn't qualify to go on. Larry reached his fist over to demonstrate next to my face. This German punched her right here, knocked her off her balance. You could see it on the replay. Mr. Donnelly picked up the story. The U.S. coach protested, but nothing came of it. That was it. She was out of the competition. Larry said, Yeah, it was a bad break, and then she ran into the boycott. Right, Mr. Donnelly explained for my benefit. 2 years later, the U.S. boycotted the Olympic Games in Moscow, so none of our athletes got to go. He stopped and stuck a finger into the middle of my chest. But all of that aside, Betty Bright was great, and she had a great amateur career. We were proud to have sponsored her. She got a free ride through college out of it. She got scholarship offers from all the big schools. She chose Florida A&M so she could stay close to her family. Mom, Dad, and Eric walked up behind Mr. Donnelly. He turned and said, What, you're leaving so soon? Mom smiled. I'm afraid so. Busy, busy, busy. Hey, it was great to meet you, Eric. Mom, Dad, and Eric smiled. And it was great to meet you too, Paul. Mom, Dad, and Eric all pulled back at once, as if in group shock, as if that was the craziest thing they'd ever heard. We said a couple more goodbyes and hustled outside, ready to run in case of the mosquitoes were still there. They weren't. Eric walked up and opened the passenger side door of the Land Cruiser. I don't think Arthur expected that. He looked up quickly, his eyes wide and startled in the dome light. He scooped something shiny from the dashboard into a plastic bag as Eric closed the door. Then all was dark inside again. The Land Cruiser's engine roared to life and they pulled away. Mom, Dad, and I walked home through the smoky air. We all had come up with things to say to Mr. Donnelly, bright and clever things, but we had never left to say to each other. When we got to our house, Dad unlocked his car, reached in, and pressed the garage door opener. The door slid up for us just as we reached it. We all ducked inside quickly, but I stopped myself at the kitchen door. I had to stop, and I had to look back because something was nagging at me, troubling me. A memory? Mom called back to me. Will you get the garage door button, please? One of them must have turned on the message machine because I suddenly heard my grandmother's voice. She said, Caroline, your father and I are talking about taking some vacation time down in Florida. I heard those few words spoken to Grandmom's flat voice. I heard them deep inside me. I never heard the rest of her message. Stood still in that garage, staring back out at the driveway, and I remembered standing in her garage in Huntsville, staring out at the driveway. Grandmom and Grandpop came walking up. They each carried an overnight bag in one hand. Eric suddenly appeared in the driveway, so they stopped to say hello to him. Mom was standing next to me. I remember her bending over and whispering, "Paul, darling, don't say anything bad to Grandmom and Grandpop." They resumed walking up to where we stood. Grandmom looked at me and then leaned back as if to see me better, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Grandpop leaned the other way. He bent over, right in my face, and said, "What the hell happened to your eyes?" Mom told them, "We can talk about it inside. The important thing is that he's going to be okay." Remember them all going in, leaving me staring out at the driveway, leaving me to stare out at Eric, who was staring back in at me. Tuesday, November 7th. We had our last home game today against Manatee Middle. They hadn't won a game all year, and they had been recently trounced 8-zip by Lake Windsor Middle. They looked terrified to be on the same field as the fearsome War Eagles. I got to start the game at left wing because Nita was out with the flu. At about 2 minutes into the game, Maya hooked a 30-yard shot right into the net. The goaltender never even moved. At 5 minutes into the game, she did it again, but this time the ball hit the right post and came bouncing back at chest level, right across the mouth of the goal. I drove at it and connected with my forehead right above the glasses. I hit the ground and the ball sailed into the back of the net. A beautiful high reel goal. Victor pulled me to my feet, shouting, "Yeah, yeah, come on, let's get another." We lined up again quickly, as we always do. The Manatee coach called timeout and came running onto the field to talk to the referee. We had to stand there and wait while the referee signaled Betty Bright to join them. It wasn't until then that I noticed the storm overhead. It had blown in quickly, darkening the field and lowering the temperature. A bolt of lightning shot down, the thunder following almost immediately. The coaches' conference broke up, and the Manatee guy waved his players out the field. They seemed eager to get away from us and back into their bus. Betty Bright called us into the circle. "The coach says they can't play in any lightning. It's their school policy." Victor said, "So they quit? That's the game?" "No, right now it's a rain delay. Let's all get inside and try to keep loose." We ran into the building and congregated around the double doors into the back. The referee, a tall woman with short blonde hair, came in behind us just as the rain hit. Victor went up to her. "Yo, ref, what's up with this? Are we going to have to play some kind of rainout game?" The referee wrote something into a little notebook. She replied, "Nope, this is it. You play today or it goes down as no game in our book." "What's that mean?" "It's like it didn't happen." Victor grabbed me by the shoulder and shook me dramatically. "What about Fisherman's goal?" The referee sounded sympathetic. "It didn't happen. Not if we don't play at least half a game." "Man," Victor pounded eagerly on my back, "we were gonna murder these chumps. It was gonna be like 50-0. I was gonna up my numbers." Betty Bright kept looking out the window. She said, "It doesn't matter. We might play. If we don't, we're still undefeated." She paused to point at Victor and untied. I, I was a reference to Lake Windsor Middle School and what had happened to them yesterday. Up until yesterday, they had the same record as us. Then they took at that bus ride to Palmetto Middle School, home of the Whippoorwills, and got stuck in a 0-0 tie. Maybe they couldn't handle a dirty play or the acorn throwers. We hung around near the back door, shuffling in our cleats for 20 more minutes of pounding rain. Finally, Betty Bright called out, "There they go." We crowded by the doors, and I could see the red taillights of the Manatee bus receding in the rain. Victor turned to the referee. "They quit, right? It's a forfeit?" The referee shook her head. "No, not under these circumstances. You could never have played in this weather." "We play in any weather, lady. We're the War Eagles." The referee handed a piece of paper to Betty Bright. "I guess that's up to you, but this is a no game today. All right, coach?" Betty Bright nodded. She signaled for us to gather around. "Nothing more we can do here today. Maya, Paul Fisher, good going with these goals. But they don't count, so we have to forget about them. Everybody get up to your classrooms and get changed, with no horsing around. We have practice tomorrow. Our last practice. We have a game on Friday. Our last game." Victor interjected. "Lake Windsor, home of that Gino chump." The coach replied, Lake Windsor, home of the only other undefeated team, but they couldn't pull the ball in the goal yesterday. Yeah, they shut out that Gino fool. You forget about him, Victor, or you'll end up the fool. You concentrate on us putting the ball in the goal. If we get over there and lose our heads, lose our focus, we lose everything that we work for. We could win it all too, right? That's right. Remember, all of you, we have the better record. The title is ours to win. Like they say in the big leagues, we're in control of our own destiny.